very special guest for you tonight.
Hello, we've been expecting you.
This is not a test. Your government and corporate overlords have implemented new measures for your own health and safety. We are just following orders.
Everything is going to be fine.
I'd like to introduce
Welcome everyone to another If by Whiskey. Jason, you have the con. I'm excited, man. Go for it.
We're doing our NPR voices today? Is this?
I'm trying to stay calm and collected because we have very much genius on the other line. We have intelligence and logic and reason. So I'm trying to stay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to welcome our special guest today, Per Bylund, Senior Fellow at the Mises Institute, the Chair of the School of Entrepreneurship at Oklahoma State University, and author of many books and scholarly works, including these, a primer, How to Think About the Economy, and The Seen, the Unseen, and the Unrealized, both very good, amongst dozens of other works, scholarly articles, hundreds maybe, I can't count. It's too many to count. But also an excellent and generous podcast guest for spending time with us today. Welcome, Per. How are you?
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you. And I think you're right. You can't count because I don't think I reached 100 just yet.
Well, someday. There's time. Once you get the AI working for you, you can just crank them out. One a day.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, welcome to
How many
If by
have you
Whiskey.
offered, if you don't mind me asking, before we continue?
I'm not sure, actually. It depends a little bit on how you count it. I mean, I have 4 books that I wrote myself. I think I've edited like 3 or so. And then journal articles. I mean, I have them all listed on my website. But it's could it be
A lot.
50 maybe?
That sounds like 100 to me. We'll call it time served for you, Per. How about that?
It felt like 100.
Yeah. Yeah, what are you working on these days? Got anything fun coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 books that I'm working on. So one is basically an abridged version of Human Action by Mises. So I'm trying to cut it down in size to just basically just all the economics and nothing else. So this is actually a work sort of inspired by Paul Krugman. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I know he said at some point that he got the question. Someone asked him, "Have you read Human Action by Mises?" And he said, like, "Well, I tried to read it, but there was just no economics in it, so I stopped reading it." And that's basically true, right? When you read it, there's the first 100, 150 pages, something like that. It's philosophy, it's methodology, and things like that to just set the stage for a proper sound economics. But what I figured when I heard him say that is that, yeah, there's a lot of economists out there who try Human Action and may start reading it from cover to cover, basically, and they go, "What the hell is this? There's no economics." So I suggested to the Mises Institute and to Joe Salerno, the academic vice president, that maybe we should have like an abridged version. And I mean, it has an obvious name, right? The Economics of Human Action.
Mhm.
So I'm going to put that together, and it's going to be like maybe a quarter of the length or something like that. So I'm working on that. I'm maybe 2/3 through it, just cutting, not adding anything of my own, just keeping all of Mises' own words, just making it a lot shorter and condensed, sort of focused on economics. And then I'm writing a book on my own, which is on Austrian price theory, which I have the deadline late in the spring, and then it's going to be published later next year.
Excellent. So how is that going to be different? Actually, I happen to have also right here with me Bob Murphy's book, Choice, Cooperation, Enterprise, and Human Action. It's also I wouldn't say an abridged version of Human Action, but it's kind of this, introducing the concepts, an easier read perhaps than Mises' Human Action itself. How will it be different?
Well, I mean, Bob's book is excellent, but it's really a summary of what Human Action is about. And if I recall, it's like every chapter the chapter is about this. These are the contributions, and it's talking about what Mises wrote about, like just sort of introducing it to a more of a lay reader. And what I'm doing is not adding anything myself at all. I'm not going to add a single word. That's at least my goal, and I'm just going to keep Mises' own words, and keep only the economics and any political commentary. And there is some, and also philosophy and history and things like that is going to be cut out. So it's only economics. And the point is sort of to have a book for non-Austrian economists, even though that's sort of a contradiction in terms, I think. But and then also to have it as sort of a textbook for maybe advanced undergrads or grad students in economics, so they can read it and they can get up to speed on sound economics.
Sounds awesome, because I have to admit I've never got through Human Action myself all the way. So I'm very excited for that. I'll be looking forward to it. Oh, Mark, you're muted there, buddy.
Whole comedy of errors, everybody. I screwed up. No Rumble link. I didn't link the Rumble. I created a whole thing, didn't link it. I'll upload it later. I apologize. So join on X, join on YouTube. My calmness has become frazzled anxiousness now, anxiety. So no, once again, before we continue, Per, thank you so much for joining. Jason, we have a ton of people already on. So let's welcome all these people, because I know these are people who would love to hear your insight and very much love to share their beings, because I'm sure they'd love to have you connect with them in some way. For example, like Free would definitely like that. I'm sure.
Cool. Well, I think it's time. We got to do it. Before we go any further, it is time. And I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going from memory here, but it's time for the moment that makes the lizard people run back to the sewers. It scrambles the CIA's spy network, and it does something else that I can't remember. It is time for the simulation sip.
All you need is a flask, a mug, an ancient alien thermos, a horn, a coffee cup filled with any beverage that Big Pharma hasn't canceled yet. Could be coffee, tea, ivermectin smoothies, even whiskey. Dealer's choice. Also did it from memory, Jason, because you did.
Congratulations. Well, raise your glass with us. We have our special guest, Per. We're gonna have
that looks like a beautiful red.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is.
It is time.
Cheers.
Here we go. So welcome back to this little glitch in the matrix. Again, we're here with Per Bylund, or Bylund. I think it's Bylund officially, but I've heard it both ways. So whatever you'd like to call us, we will. Or I mean, whatever. Man, I'm lost today. Labor Day, taking a day off, really messed with my mind.
I had to set an alarm for today. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, I need to set an alarm because I'm so out of routine, not working, actually sitting behind a keyboard.
Yeah.
Anyway, and welcome everybody. We got a huge crowd of people who are the people that are on right now. Absolutely want to hear the jewels of wisdom, the nuggets that we're going to extract today. So very excited.
Yeah. Well, it is Labor Day, so I thought we could talk a little bit about that. I guess that means we're celebrating the labor theory of value. Is that right?
I hope not. I mean, other than Marxist, I think the labor theory of value is dead and buried. They're trying to keep it alive and trying to, I don't know, resurrect it over and over again. But I mean, in a sense, I would say that Marx was very unlucky that he wrote his big treatise on economics, which was really intended to just justify his politics, but still it was sort of received as economics. And he published the first volume in 1867, if I recall correctly, and is based off of the labor theory of value. But only 4 years later, Menger publishes his Principles of Economics, where he introduces subjective value and marginalism. So it took 4 years from publishing the first volume of Capital until it was outdated and completely wrong, and everybody knew it.
Maybe there's something to be said about just doing things wrong in public, and somebody will come along and make sure that they let you know about it, right?
As long as that someone is called Lenin and doesn't mind killing a lot of people, then you're going to have a lot of influence. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. You got to watch out for those. Yeah.
Speaking of Lenin, quick interjection before we jumped on here. Quick thanks to Thane. Thane put a post out about Unhumans by Jack Posobiec and Joshua Lysick. Jason has a copy, actually, I think behind him in the bookcase. And basically just reached out, and he agreed, at least through a text, through a tweet, to have a conversation with us. So we're very much looking forward to that. He wrote a book called Unhumans, Per, and it's about communism and its dangers and whatnot.
And all its glory. Yes, but we're here with Per now. So on the topic of Labor Day, maybe we can get a quick thing about unions, because that is, I think, what Labor Day is really meant to celebrate. Perhaps not unions per se, but just the idea of advancements the American worker have made through collective bargaining, things like that. So what's the problem with unions, right? It seems like, hey, the wages are higher, you get more benefits, you get pensions, all this stuff. So what's the downside here?
Yeah, I mean, I have really have one thing about against the unions, and it is their legal privileges. That the state comes in and gives them special rights against employers and against everybody else. I mean, the little thing that they can force people in a company to become members and that sort of thing. You just vote on it, and then everybody becomes a member, and that sort of force and coercion doesn't really have any place in the marketplace at all, I think. I mean, as an interest group, I didn't really mind unions much at all. Of course, they can't do what they promise. So in a sense, it's fraudulent, right? Because they promise higher wages because based on the Marxist exploitation theory, they think that by basically getting together all of them and pushing the employer and forcing the employer to accept higher wages, they can increase wages for everyone, which of course is not true. Because they can only increase wages for themselves and their members, and what that means is that others are either going to have lower wages, relatively speaking, or they're simply jobs that will never be realized because the wages are higher. So I mean, there is no such thing as a magic pill in economics where you can just suddenly create a lot of extra value for people and hand them that without there being a downside. Everything is a trade-off, and that goes for unions too. So it's sort of it's based on a misunderstanding of economics. But as an interest group, I mean, it's totally fair game to create an organization to organize workers and try to increase wages. I don't see a problem with that at all.
Like a PTO for workers, for adults.
Say it again.
Like a PTO, like a parent-teacher organization for adults.
Yeah, but I mean, traditionally they have. I'm not all that informed on the American labor movement, but traditionally, at least in Europe, they've had a pretty good track record in terms of education and strengthening the productivity of workers by simply offering them education on the side, right? So they have had their own study circles. Unfortunately, it's often been also Marxist works rather than actual good stuff. But they have provided workers with that sort of thing to raise their productivity in the marketplace and therefore their value as laborers, and also providing services that are now usually monopolized by the state, such as retirement or sick leave or things like that, right? So it used to be the case back in the day, and we're talking over 100 years ago, right? That workers would pitch in when one of them got ill or something like that, just to help their family. And sometimes it was more formal than other times. It was basically a small insurance scheme in a sense, right? Where they all pitched in a little bit every month so that if someone got hurt, they would not be in trouble. And very often the unions would be sort of the initiator or the administrator of these things, which are just voluntary organizations and voluntary solutions to problems, and they have many of these have later been taken over by the state and monopolized by force, of course. And now we have such things as Social Security and whatever else. And we know that is a Ponzi scheme, right? There's no money there. But it used to be the case that there was actually money there, where you could actually tap into that if you needed it. And then since it was small scale and decentralized, and it was basically your work buddies who pitched in and kept on pitching in when you hurt yourself, you wanted to get up and get back to work soon, to not be a burden on them, right? So it worked really well that way. Whereas when the state does this nationally or even internationally in some cases, then of course everybody wants to be a free rider because there's basically no one who picks up the tab.
Yeah, there's no connection, so there's no way to feel that in a weird way guilt, right? There's like a full circle of an arrangement of a voluntary system is I take care of you when you're sick, but you also get up when you're feeling better. You're not going to mooch off of me. You're going to get up, and then when I don't feel great, you're going to do that, right? So there is a closure to that contract.
Yeah, exactly. And then it works, right? Because then those sort of redistribution things, they work to help people who fall through or are unlucky, which is usually the case, right? When you hurt yourself or if you get sick or whatever it might be. Or maybe you have a kid who's sick, or it doesn't really matter what it is. But yes, you want to get back in and contribute to your group, because you don't want to be a burden on those people who you work with and who you are close with and who you have helped as well. But if it is the state, then it's sort of a faceless system where you just, as long as you can get something out of it, you're gaining, and someone else, I mean, you distribute the cost onto the, like in this country, 330 million other people. And how many of them do you know? Well, not a whole lot of them. I mean, even if you're like really a social butterfly, then you're going to know just a small fraction of those people. So the rest of them, you don't care a whole lot if they pay a few dollars extra, right? So you might as well just take those benefits and run.
Yeah, and this is one thing to learn about is that Dunbar number, right? There's that Dunbar number of about 150 people on the outside of people you might know, and then there's closer circles inside of that, like smaller concentric circles, down to like a family of 5 to 20, minimum of 20 people, very intimately and whatnot. And that's the interesting thing is there is a limit to that on the human side, and once you get away from that, the connection does really absolve you of it almost feels like you can be absolved of responsibility to those other people to whom you have no connection or with whom you have no connection.
Yeah, right. And I think also with the division of labor, you become interdependent with others. So you understand them better. And of course, you want to get it up there and get up to speed and work and contribute as well, because otherwise the others will suffer. But I think the Dunbar number, it applies to really strong ties with other people, right? So when you're living in a small community or something like that, but we can have many different communities. And there's also the 6 degrees of separation, right? Where you can have 6 links and you can get to any freaking person on this planet. And
technology's made that easier, certainly, to connect.
Exactly. And that means that you can find people who are like you in some sense that matters to you and not like you in every sense necessarily, right? So you can have, say, libertarian friends all over the world and you have nothing else in common with them, but you can trust them completely because they have the same values as you do. And you might not even know what they look like. It doesn't really matter. So that could
Shout out to Econ Bro in Nigeria.
Yeah, right. For instance, right? And he's awesome, by the way. But you have all of these people everywhere where you can totally depend on them, at least for certain things, right? And they can be your tribe in terms of values and debates and maybe economic policy and whatever your interests are. And then you can have another tribe for something else. And then you can have a local tribe for just hands-on stuff. So, I mean, it's definitely a different world now than it was back then.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of government intervention, I don't know if we were talking about that, but here's my segue anyway. Intel. Donald Trump just announced, I think about a week ago now, that the U.S. government is taking a 10% stake in Intel. Now, according to the press release, they are not having a board seat. They're not making any controlling decisions in the company. But I don't know if we really buy that. Like, It's hard to imagine that that kind of money comes without any strings attached. What do you think?
And he got it for free.
He got it for free.
It wasn't on our dime at all. It was totally free
No.
all this time. Anyway,
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
free stuff. I mean,
so
Yeah,
love your thoughts on that.
I really hate this stuff. I mean, it's a there's a debate apparently online whether this is socialism or fascism. I mean, we can talk about that too, but the state should not own part of corporations. That's just ridiculous, and it can't really contribute anything. It can contribute in terms of providing special benefits and privileges to these specific corporations, but that just harms the consumer. And I think I know what President Trump tried to do here, that the government had already sort of invested, quote unquote, in the company and their research, so he wanted something back. And I can sort of understand the logic behind that, but ownership is not something that the government should do. Definitely not. I mean, what they should do is say that, well, it's a loan. Of course, they should never have given them the money to begin with. But they could have offered it as a loan, or say that, well, let's change the deal. You have to pay us back within a certain time frame, or what have you. But ownership, ownership implies sort of control in some extent, right? So there's going to be votes. There's going to be selection of board members and voting on board members, and the state is going to have, or the White House, I guess, is going to have 10%, since they own 10%. So, I mean, maybe they will not, okay, but maybe they will. And what happens when the state comes out and says, we're going to sell our 10% share in Intel? I mean, that's a very strong signal that the state that no longer believes in Intel, right? So even if that is not the case, that they just want to get out of all companies, which would be a good thing, and get the money back, it still will send a very strong signal that people will go, oh, wait a minute, if the state doesn't trust Intel, should we? Right? So that's going to harm the company, and it's going to harm their R&D and their investments and everything like that too. So, I mean, there's simply no way of benefiting from this at all, and it's definitely not a way of sort of owning the Chinese. That now finally we as the state own 10% of Intel. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's kind of the motivation behind this, right? Is that most of the semiconductor chip production happens overseas. It happens a lot in Taiwan, China, Korea. I work in the industry, so I'm a little bit familiar with this, but Intel has been struggling recently, and you've got a lot of good stuff in this book that's on these lines. But what kind of signals is that sending when the government has to step in? Like the protection, all of it. I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, long term, it's going to be a problem too, because I mean, if they own a part of it, then of course they have to step in every time they are in trouble. And there's going to be also a public pressure for expanding it and things like that too, right? And of course, like you mentioned, Intel, this specific example, they have not been doing so great for the past several years, because they have not been able to produce anything that competes with the ARM architecture and things like that, right? So at least in terms of consumer gadgets or front-end gadgets, and machines like that, they have not been successful. And at that point, the state steps in to invest, or at least take an ownership share. That's basically a bailout, it seems like, right? Or rather, maybe this is just quid pro quo, because the government has already spent a lot of money to help Intel finance the research that didn't pan out. But then, since it hasn't, well, that means that Intel will probably be in trouble in years to come. And then who will need to step in and save Intel? Well, the government. Of course, there's even more pressure on the government to do so, since they're now owners too. So taxpayers, quote unquote, are going to lose their 10% stake in this huge company if the state does not step in and fund whatever deficits there might be and whatever investments need to be done. So in this this is not a winning strategy at all. It's a first step, however, on the road to serfdom, where the government might need to buy a stake in all companies, to be fair, say, or increase their ownership in all kinds of private companies, or claim that maybe computers and communication is actually infrastructure that is necessary for national security or something like that. So
Copyright
maybe
the ones and zeros for binary code. Let's do it.
well, there you go. And I mean, there's so many ways this can go wrong, and I'm not sure I can see any ways that this can go right.
I mean, is there anything to, people will say like, well, if we don't, then all the chip production happens in other countries. And what happens if we have too much war with other countries and they don't like us, they don't want to trade with us? Now we're out of these advanced processors. So isn't there some case to be said that, oh, this should happen in America? And if we let it go, it's worse in the long run.
Well, no, it's the short answer. But
I expected, yeah.
I mean, people claim national security and these things that, well, if there is a war and whatever else, but well, first of all, don't mess with other nations. Don't start any wars. I mean, that would be a good start to not end up in a war, right?
Be friendly. At least
Right.
courteous, friendly. You
Right.
don't have to
So
like people to be courteous.
right, treat people like people would be a good advice, right? And I think for me as an economist, I mean, the point is always that production is undertaken to benefit consumers, and nothing else, right? It's not the case that we have entrepreneurs innovating and producing new things and figuring out how to create more value and things like that in order to strengthen national security the way some dude in Washington, D.C. prefers to interpret it right now, because it's going to change in next year and then the next week and whatever. So, I mean, national security is just this amoebic sort of fake argument that they pull in order to be able to and sort of justify whatever they want to do in the economy and in society
It's
overall.
such an ambiguous vagary, right? I mean, like, we're going to take over Greenland, national security. We're going to take over, Intel, 10%, national security. We're going to take over infrastructure. We're going to give Palantir this, national security. It's silly what the blanket of national security, everything's our protection and security and liberty. We talk about Franklin and how if you trade them in, you don't deserve it, right? It's just such a
Mark,
crazy concept.
it's because they hate us for our freedoms. Don't you know that?
They actually do hate us for our freedom. Those are actually the people who do hate us for our freedom, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, on the topic of protectionism, I think we got to bring up tariffs, right? So the last week, I think we're up to about $180 billion of tariff revenue since Trump started his tariff wars. So it's been on and off. His policies seem to change almost every day, so I can't keep track of what is or is not tariffed at the moment. But yeah, 180 billion. It's no small chunk of change, and it seems to keep rising. So what's going on here? Is this a win? This is a softball question, if there ever was one. Is this a win for America?
No kidding.
We saw the tweet ahead of time, Per, just so you know, we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, 180 billion, it sounds like a lot of money, and it is. I mean, if I had 180 billion, then I would be really rich. But compared to just the deficit of the federal government every year, it's nothing. So this doesn't really make a difference at all. And what this really is a redistribution of wealth from consumers to the federal government. No one else is really involved. So consumers are 180 billion poorer because of this, and the federal government has 180 billion dollars more to spend on whatever goodies. Assuming, of course, that the Supreme Court backs them up, which appears to be not super likely, perhaps. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not
if we may, very quickly, if we may, that is breaking news. They did say that they need to reverse the tariffs on October 1st unless they appeal. Is that correct, through SCOTUS? So that is the newest development on that, I think.
Right. So they might not even be able to keep that money, but they have to pay them back. And then, of course, that money is not going to
Who do
end
they
up
pay
with
back?
consumers. Right. So I mean, here's the thing: if someone imports stuff from China, they will have to pay these tariffs to the government. So the importer pays the tariffs, or maybe the business in China, in some cases, will pay it. But that doesn't mean that they're going to go, oh, damn, tariffs, we're just going to cut into our profits a little bit. No, they're also going to pass it on to the consumer, right? So assuming that they can pass on all of it to the consumer, and then this SCOTUS says, well, naughty government, you have to pay it back. Well, they don't pay it back to the consumers who paid higher prices. They pay it back to the importers and perhaps the foreign business, if there is one that paid it, right? So it's still a wealth redistribution from consumers to no longer the federal government, but instead to importers, to corporations.
And the bigger importers, because the smaller ones stopped importing when the tariffs got outside of their profit margins, right?
Yeah,
So it
exactly.
actually disproportionately affects larger, in a positive way, affects the larger companies that can absorb the deeper costs because they're going to get those kickbacks.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a small thing like cash flow. Small businesses, they struggle with cash flow every month and trying to make ends meet. And maybe they're profitable, but if they can't get enough money flowing in to pay the bills, it doesn't matter how much profit you make on every sale. You still go bankrupt. And a lot of small businesses, they fail and they go bankrupt when they scale up, even if they're profitable, because of the cash flow problem, right? So many small businesses, if they were importing stuff, and you have plenty of people who run sort of businesses online where they basically just combine expertise from different places. So they have contact with someone online who designs the product, and then they send the design to a factory in Taiwan, and then the shipper will take it from Taiwan to somewhere. And so, I mean, they are just coordinating these processes, and those small businesses are usually more innovative than the big ones, and are also catering to more specific wants by consumers, and not just the mass market, like sort of Walmart style, but rather have sort of tailor-made stuff for I don't know, people who have specialized interests or like certain things, or if it's a smaller market or what have you. Those have either stopped importing because they can't, or they've gone bankrupt already. So it is, of course, it is the bigger businesses that are going to gain, relatively speaking. But that's the case with any tax, any regulation. It's always the
Right.
big businesses that can cover those costs, whereas the small ones cannot. And it's all even
And
a
that's the thing
strategy.
we try to share with people, right? I mean, literally people think that these businesses we're regulating them. No, we're not regulating them. We're regulating everyone else but them so they can even get a deeper, bigger share of you. Like, this is the stuff that people don't even understand. It's like the small customer doesn't get the loan percent, lower rate of interest rate. So they have to pay more for their interest. The things just compound on these small. I love small businesses. I love the innovativeness, the nimbleness, how quickly they can pivot and maneuver. But it is such an uphill battle with the way things are stacked in almost every industry now with the amount of regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I ask my students in some of my classes, they always talk about regulations a little bit. And I ask them, why is it that Walmart and Amazon have been lobbying the government to raise the minimum wage? Why don't they just raise the wages they're paying? It would be very easy for them to say that, oh, from now on, we're just going to pay everybody, I don't know, $25 an hour or whatever. Instead, they say that, well, we're going to pay them more, but first, let's lobby the government.
Right.
Yeah, let's
lobby.
lobby the government so that everybody has to pay this higher minimum salary. Why is that? Well, because Amazon doesn't want a new Amazon, and Walmart doesn't want a new Walmart, and these regulations will kill these new upstarts, these new startups, these new small businesses that will become the next big thing, right? So they don't want to go the same way as Sears did, for instance, which is basically gone. They want to stay in business and reap those profits for as long as possible. And the way to do that is to stop the next big thing.
And not only that, you then have a governor who's in cahoots, like best friends with a large company in the industry you're about to regulate, and you find a way to carve them out of the regulation. right? So Gavin Newsom in this case carves out Panera Bread. So they say something about them baking something makes them exempt. Yet Einstein Bagels are baked, everybody. Einstein Bagel is not exempt from this, for example, right? And it's only because, once again, the connections of who you know, how you know, the lobby, all those other influential that are not part of the marketplace, not this fluid, self-correcting mechanism that we talk about as Austrian economists.
Yeah, and now we're also back to the national security issue, right? I mean, doesn't the government have to protect Amazon or Walmart for national security reasons? What if there is a crisis? I mean, of course, they can't protect every mom and pop store in every town, because that's almost impossible to even find them. But you need the infrastructure for transportation of goods and to make sure that there is water and food getting everywhere, right? So the government needs to protect. Well, okay, but now we're talking straight out fascism, right? Just for national security. And what is the nation we're actually protecting then, if we have to go through fascism to protect it?
Exactly. Yeah, here's a
and
good
you were
question.
talking about fascism. You were talking about fascism and communism as well.
Come back.
I do not look at fascism and communism as like a political line like this. I look at it like a globe. And if you look at it, statism is closer on both ends. They're closer to each other, basically touching on this side of it. Just they're on opposite ends, where no statism versus statism. That's how I more see it. And you see fascism and communism both using the state as a centralized power versus a decentralized. So it's
definitely. And I mean, economically speaking, fascism and communism are different systems, right? So communism or socialism. I mean, communism now it means something else, but originally it was Marx's term for socialism. It was his own type of socialism, but socialism meant the government ownership of the means of production. So I mean, anything that is not your personal belongings should be owned by the state. Whereas fascism means that no, private companies can own these things and run them, but they should all run following the orders by the state. So I mean, it's private, but that sort of thing. So I mean, it's not socialism formally speaking, but it's damn close.
Yeah, like what I think it was Hayek. He said that fascism is the stage reached after communism proves an illusion, something like that. So it's basically communism with some extra steps.
I think Mussolini said, there's a famous quote. He said that everything within the state, nothing outside the state, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about fascism and how similar it is to socialism.
Yeah, here's a good question for you. Justin says, was it for the best that we became a country that imports rather than produces in the first place? Sure, that made products cheaper for the consumer, but it also made us dependent on other countries.
Yeah, I mean, the question has different answers depending on what perspective you take. So I mean, from an economist perspective, it doesn't really matter because whatever is cheaper and better for the consumer, whatever the consumer chooses, is what should be what we're doing, right? This mixes in other things too. I mean, we as a nation or as a country, that becomes sort of a collectivist argument, and we talk about dependence and things like that. But there's also an international division of labor that makes everybody more productive. So we in America can produce certain things better than other countries can, but they can produce certain things that better than we can, and then we're better off trading. And trading is not only about consumer goods, right? Most trade is actually B2B, is business to business. So it's within supply chains. I mean, there was a study, well, I guess there have been several, but looking at what is actually imported and what is not imported and sort of made in America, that sort of thing, right? And I mean, every country has buy my country's stuff, because it's always assumed that it's better and we know what it is and that sort of thing. But of course, that's complete bullshit. It's just made up. It's an emotional argument, and there's a value to that too. But there's no difference really in substance. But in terms of importing, I think they looked at cars, and they looked at the American manufacturers of cars, and of course they used a lot of different parts and technologies that were produced abroad. So they imported a lot, but they're called American cars. And then you have foreign cars like Hyundai and Toyota and whatever else. And they have just as much of American-made parts in them, and they might be assembled in the US, even though it's like a Japanese car or South Korean car. So you can't really, in this day and age, it's impossible to say that this product is and then has a certain country where it's from, because very often every damn little thing is from different countries. I saw not very long ago, there was I was shopping for nuts and there was this bag and I looked at it and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's almost too much because it had product of, and then it listed like, I think it was 14 countries. And there was a nut. This was a nut mix of like six
Was it
different
mixed
types of
nuts?
nuts.
Okay, that makes sense.
So six
Yeah.
different types. But how can you have 6 different types of nuts from like 14 countries? But the thing is that they buy in the spot market, right? They get the nuts from where they're cheapest and where they get whatever quality they want. And then there's a little oil and there's a little salt and then there's the packaging and then you have the workers and the packaging and you run it through these factories here and there. So of course it's
Imagine
involved
figuring
everything.
that tariff out.
Mm.
Yeah, we're going to get 15% to this nut country, 28% to this nut country, and 13% to
They're all nuts. Well, no, that's a real problem, right? We've had to create an entire department in our company to handle the question of where do parts come from and how much tariff do we now owe on it. And like I said, it changes almost every day, it seems like. So every day they have to come back and figure out, oh, what are we doing here? Because we make these machines that have thousands of parts in them, and there's no way that they can all be sourced in one place.
Well, you know what's going to happen when they do this, right? Yes, they will need a new department in the government. So plenty of good jobs for the government. That's one thing. Of course, they're going to put most of the burden on American businesses. So you have to report everything, where everything is from, and then you have to have a paper trail and all that other stuff, right? So the businesses will need a huge bureaucracy in order to comply with this, to prove that they are mostly American or whatever, wherever they set the limit, right? If it's 62% American made or whatever. And to prove that takes a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of manpower that could instead be used to produce stuff for consumers.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you got the shyster element, which opens it up for people fudging the numbers this way and that and manipulating it to their needs. If it's not there, it's not able to hide anywhere. It's in plain sight to begin with, right? So.
Yeah, but at least we have American-made bureaucracy. 100%.
USA,
right?
USA, USA.
And how's that working out for us? Really well, I think. Man. Anyway, where were we? We're talking about tariffs. There's this idea of a trade imbalance. You hear this all the time. The United States is at such a disadvantage compared to the rest of the world because we import so much more than we export. Is that a problem? And if not, why not?
No, it's not. And I heard that, I'm not sure if this is actually true. So, I mean, but I'm going to mention it anyway, but with that caveat that President Trump wanted a trade balance with every country. And I can sort of perhaps get the argument that there's a trade imbalance, domestic versus foreign made. So imports and exports just in general. So that's also false, but I can sort of see the logic or the lack of logic. But there's at least perhaps a case to be made. But with every country,
it's bad thought, but there is thought. Like the gears are smoking and churning as they're grinding, but you do feel the movement at least trying to make it like cognitive sense. Yeah, I'm with you.
Right,
just like us.
But with every country, I mean, you have countries that don't produce a whole lot, or produce certain things that we want, but they don't use a whole lot of what we produce. So, I mean, are you then going to, as the government, well, maybe they will instruct Intel. So maybe we're buying coconuts from I don't know. I have no idea where they grow coconuts, but some country somewhere in the South probably, and they export a lot of coconuts, is the government then going to instruct Intel to produce special chips that they can use that are cheap enough for them so that we can have a trade balance with that country? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But even looking at just the total amount of import and export, no, you don't need a balance. And most of us have a trade imbalance with the world. We go to work and we get a salary, and what is the point of the salary? To buy stuff. That's the whole reason we go to work. And that means that in terms of buying stuff, well, we have a trade imbalance because we have a trade deficit because we're buying food from the grocer, we're buying clothes from whatever store, and we're buying all this other stuff, right? We're buying cars from the dealership. So we have an enormous imbalance. But that's the whole point. That's the flow of money, right? Going through our working for the employer, getting paid so that we can buy the stuff.
Well, there was one country, I think, was just exporting diamonds. They have no need for American imports. There's just no need. So it's one-sided. That obviously looks crazy on the books, but you know what I mean? Take a step back from that. That's not logic and reason just to look at that on a stat sheet and go, okay, that imbalance is the same as a, general imbalance.
Right, and that imbalance is there because the greater value for us is to get the diamonds from them, right? Without necessarily selling them something. Right. So there's every voluntary trade has two winners. Right. The reason that we engage in voluntary trade, no matter with whom, no matter how often or how big trades, but every trade is undertaken because we expect to be better off. So as long as it's not coerced in some way, every trade is a good thing. And I mean, there are always going to be times when we want to buy more stuff than we can produce. Well, that means that we're going to sell off a lot of stuff so that we can buy more things because we want the things more than we want whatever else we have, right? And there are going to be times when we export more than we import because I don't know, there might be more uncertainty or we're very productive right now or whatever, right? And these balances would be easy to follow back in the day because the currency was gold, right? So money was sound, real money. So it's easy to see that, well, if we would import a lot of stuff, a lot of gold would flow out of the country, which meant that we would need to export to get our hands on gold if we wanted to trade more, right? So there was a natural balancing. Today, with monetary policy in the hands of a central bank, they would just print more currency, which means that we can extend these trade deficits for a very long time, for as long as people will accept the money, right? And since the dollar is the number one currency that people want to hold and also use in international trade, we've been able to export dollars for a long time and basically live off of and in a sense redistribute our inflation onto foreigners. I mean, that's basically what America has done, right, for decades. So to say that, well, we shouldn't have a trade imbalance, we should do something about this. Well, okay, but that also means that we're going to get many of these dollars back, which might be a problem, right? If dollars start flowing back into the country. So if we want to say make up for the deficits for the past couple of decades, well, that means we're going to have a ton of dollars, but not a whole lot of goods, and that's going to be a huge problem. But I mean, but there's also another aspect to it, and that is simply that what are these people abroad doing when they get their hands on dollars? Well, very often they invest the dollars somewhere, and where do they invest them? Well, they invest them where they get the better return. Where do they get the better return? Well, usually in America, because America is the freest and most productive economy. So they invest in production here. Okay, but that investment in production here means that we're going to ramp up production. So we're going to become more productive. That means that we're going to be able to export more in the future. So, I mean, over time, it's going to balance out anyway. So this is sort of it's a non-problem that sounds like a problem because we use the word deficit, and therefore it's like, oh my God, this can't be good. But it's really just a trade.
Yeah.
There's nothing but just an exchange, voluntary exchange. There's nothing strange going on at all.
Yeah, at a real simple level, it's, we're sending them money and we're getting more stuff. That's kind of like a sign of our wealth as a country, right? That we're able to just buy more things than we actually send out.
Exactly. And you could argue that we've been living beyond our means for quite some time, for the simple reason that we have been printing dollars, and then we use those dollars to import stuff. But
Right. But that
that's
that person that started out in the slums and worked their way up to this small little place and then got to the suburbs and then they worked their way up within the system that we're talking about. Those people are the people we're talking about who work their way up to that sense of building their way out of some challenges, right? So they can then offload the other things.
Well, here's another question for you. This should be a good one.
A lot of comments. There's a lot of comments.
Evolutionary capitalist utilitarianism says a real market won't defend Lockean property. An enforcement firm will and should just sell their enforcement services to the highest bidder, not the person with Lockean claim. I meant to actually click another one. Sorry. I wanted to click this one from expecting to be better off is not better off. People who invested in Madoff's fund found out the hard way. Value is objective. What do you think about that?
Well, I disagree that value is objective because it's not. But returns in terms of dollars are. And yes, I deliberately stress that you enter a trade and you undergo an exchange with someone expecting to become better off. It doesn't mean that you necessarily are. You can become, you can be fooled. You can realize that, oh, this isn't actually what I wanted, or it wasn't as good as I thought, or whatever else. But if it's voluntary and it's not fraudulent, I mean, the example was Bernie Madoff. So that's not really a voluntary trade where you're you're just cheating people, right, in the Ponzi scheme. So if you're forced to trade or if there is fraud, then it's not a free market a transaction, because those are unlawful and prohibited in the free market too. So
I was going to say, to your point about value being objective or whatever, it's not. I mean, imagine you have 100 tile workers and you have 100 carpenters, and I'm a shipbuilder. I know who I'd hire first of that group of two people. Both are highly skilled in their own thing, but the value to me would be the carpenter that can work with the wood, that can help me build the ships better than the tile work, and then someone who can tile or work.
You don't want to make a tile ship? Come on.
That'd be pretty cool. But you know what I'm saying, right? I mean, that's kind of the point we're talking about the objectivity or the subjectivity of value, right?
Yeah, and I think everybody has the experience of buying a water bottle because you're thirsty, right? And if you buy it in Walmart, I don't know if they sell bottles, but it could be maybe 50 cents or $1 for a bottle. But if you're in a football stadium, you would gladly pay $5. Okay, but why is that? If value is objective, then you're ripped off like crazy, and why would you go through with it if you
and that's why I drink from the water fountain and get COVID on Christmas. That's why I do that, sir. Just FYI.
Yeah. Because you're locked in. You don't have any other options at that point. So if you want the beer at that time, which enjoying a football game is a good time to have a beer, your only option is to buy it for the, what is it, like $15 now for a pint.
Yeah, the Bombers are like in the 20s or something. It's been COVID.
Yeah.
I snapped today. I went to brunch with my girlfriend and her parents, and I was sitting there and she went to the restroom, and I was sitting there looking at the bill, and I just snapped. I like ripped it in half. I threw it on the ground. I said, COVID fucked us, man. And I just looked at it I've been together with my girlfriend going just about under 7 years now. That 7 years, the changes in the devaluation of our American dollar and just everything in our quality of life as a whole has diminished. I can clearly see it. I've shrunk my number of property ownership. I mean, it's crazy how that's happened, but I literally snapped today. Jason, that's why I snapped. I must have woke up on the wrong, underneath the bed or something, but I just was like, man, I feel like these last few years were just this hot poker, like just laid up our behind.
Yes, I too go through flashes of COVID rage still, even after 5+ years. it still bothers me quite a bit. I don't know what to do about it.
I have a question about regulations, if I may. It's unique. Nutritional information on boxes. Okay. Now, is this to absolve the people? So it's like, well, we wrote it on the box. I mean, what is this really for your protection, or is this really do it? Because I just looked at half and half that I just bought at the supermarket. The expiration date of half and half from Kroger. The ingredients say milk and cream. That is all the ingredients say. The expiration date is August 8th of next year. Now, I don't know what they are putting in that stuff. It can't just be milk and cream through August 8th of next year. But curious about how nutritional labels and how that's used and manipulated possibly in that same way regulations would be.
Yeah, well, in terms of your half and half, I think they probably pasteurized the hell out of it. So that's probably why.
That's an ingredient of some sort, though, right? You did something to it. You just killed it. It's worthless. But come on, just tell me that, right?
Yeah, true. I think these are imposed by the government. So, I mean, that sort of answers your question already. It's not really about informing consumers, but it looks like it perhaps. What it is about is, of course, I mean, they've changed this a number of times when they changed the rules a little bit. And every time they give the manufacturers a heads up and tell them this is what it's going to be. So change your stuff now, right? That sort of thing. And there are certain levels below them, they count as zero, even though they're not zero, but it's, of course, per serving. So certain packages, when you buy them, it says, 140 servings. Look at that. And it says 0 grams of trans fats or whatever, right? And they can write 0 if per serving it's below a certain level. It's not 0. And if you then have a package of 140 servings and say it's a half a gram per serving and they can call it 0, well, it's still 70 grams of trans fats, right? So, and they can sell it as 0 trans fats. And then, of course, consumers will think, 0 trans fats. I mean, that's awesome. And then they eat the thing and they get 70 grams, which, of course, is not very healthy or very good. And it's also fraudulent, right? Because you tell them one thing that is not true about the product. But it's sanctioned by and it's approved by the government to do this. So as long as they follow these certain rules, then you're fine, right? Just like saying it's natural flavors. I mean, it doesn't mean anything at all. The only thing it means is that
Bud Light, 100% all natural lime flavoring. That's actually what they state in their advertisement. 100% all natural lime flavoring. So lime juice? No, it's just 100% all natural lime flavoring.
Right. And I think natural is what it is when it's not 100% produced in a lab. So if it has anything to do with nature whatsoever, then it's natural, right? So it's all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, I heard, I'm not sure how true this is, but I think it's strawberry flavor that is a certain part of beaver testicles that you get some oil out of them or something like that by applying a lot of pressure and heat, and that has sort of a strawberry-ish taste.
You're making me rethink my Pop-Tart today, Per. Please do not do that. I had a strawberry frosted Pop-Tart today, sir, and I was just licking at that jelly testicle otter stuff all day.
I want to know who figured that out. Just like, I was eating these testicles and it tastes just
I've been
like
wondering
strawberries.
that too. I've been wondering that
it's like the horseshoe crab, the blue stuff in the horseshoe crab to test the. I'm like, who figured that out? I was like, it's all crazy.
I just feel sorry for the beavers. I mean, all those eunuch beavers out there. It's terrible.
Do they use the whole beaver or just the testicles?
Just the tip.
Oh my God. Anyway, let's get back to tariffs. Here's another good question. Justin says, doesn't the idea that companies will automatically pass on tariffs to the consumer challenge the free market concept? I think we should maybe walk through kind of how that happens, because you would expect simply, right? If you have to pay more to import something, you would like to just pass that cost on to the next person in the chain, right?
Yes, correct. So there's I think well, many mainstream economists, I think, don't really get this, but even sound economists, they use it as a shorthand to say that it's passed on. That's not accurate. It's just like the guy with the question here says, that of course you can't say that, well, if you're importing certain things from a country and there's now a tariff of 50%, you can't just raise the price by 50% and then consumers say, oh darn, and they pay it, right?
Yeah.
That's not the case. What will have to be what they have to do, of course, is figure out, okay, how much can we charge for this thing, which is of course what entrepreneurs do in the beginning. What sets the limit for the price is the valuation by the consumer. And then if there are competitors, then they will need to stick close to what competitors are charging too. So there is a limit to it, right? But it will still create a pressure on the price to consumers to go up, especially if there are many of them. And there are also trade-offs with other goods. So if they can't go too far, because then the consumer might buy another type of good or something like that, right? But the issue is that if they can't increase the price enough, well, when they increase the price, they can't sell as many as before, which means you leave consumers who would have wanted the good at a lower price without the good, because they will not pay the higher price and therefore will not get the benefit from it, right? So consumers will still bear the cost of it, but the tariff is not in full passed on to the consumer, if that makes sense, right? So consumers are disadvantaged definitely by whatever these importers choose to do when the tariff is imposed on them. But whether that means that there are going to be fewer goods for consumers, whether prices are going to go up, well, probably both, right? Because a tariff means that several importers are going to say screw it and not import, or not import as many, or import only the premium version, or what have you, right? Which means that consumers are instead going to perhaps buy what is domestically produced instead. And those are already of higher price, because otherwise no one would import. So the price
or lower quality in some way, right? Quality. So they so they up the price to make it, absolutely.
Right. Which means, of course, that, well, consumers pay more for the good that they wanted. So they're worse off. And there are fewer around. And I mean, there's no way around it, because production is undertaken to benefit consumers. So consumers choose to buy imported goods for a reason. If there's a higher cost to import, well, there's going to be fewer of those. Well, it means the consumer is going to choose something that they don't value as highly and that they might pay more for. And that means, of course, if they pay more for, say it's coconuts, and they instead buy coconuts from Hawaii or whatever, and they're much, much more expensive, so they're not going to buy as many. But there, of course, more people are going to buy coconuts from Hawaii than bought coconuts from Hawaii before. But those people are also going to have less money left over, because they're now buying more expensive coconuts. So they're going to buy less of other goods. And those other goods might be American made. So, I mean, it's not the case that you can say that, well, that means American businesses will benefit. No, that's not the case. And especially when there's a very limited case to be made for very specific tariffs on certain companies or certain products or something like that, because you want to penalize that sort of thing, right? And that sort of works. I mean, if you tax something, you get less of it. Fine. But this sort of imposing tariffs in general on all kinds of imports, that is exactly what we do to other countries when we call them economic sanctions. That is imposing tariffs on their imports, right? And now we do it to ourselves, but now we benefit. Okay, but if it is the case that we benefit from these tariffs, then maybe we should get rid of the sanctions against Russia, because that's not a penalty to give them the benefit. But you can't have it both ways. It has to be one way or the other.
That's the funny thing you were going to mention, is we're talking about sanctions do not hurt the oppressors. They don't hurt those in power. They hurt the people. When have they ever? Look at Cuba. I mean, it's just a perfect example of that. If I may, I saw this one. Jason, do you mind asking this one. I'd like to address it first, Per, but I'd love your thoughts on that as well.
Okay, yeah. Justin says evolutionary. Then, if that's the case, it holds true to any change in market conditions. The entrepreneur has to adapt to those conditions. How are tariffs any different?
My first thought on that, I just got off my COVID rant. Okay. These
Mm.
are unnecessary pressures from a non-free correcting, self-correcting group. It's an outside pressure that then changes all the other equation to not be prosperous in your favor, in my opinion. So
Mhm.
I'd love for your thoughts on that, Per.
Just to clarify a little bit, this was the preceding comment.
Oh, okay.
The ability to pass down tariff costs depends on the elasticity of demand. You mentioned demand a little bit. So if costs go up, then demand may go down. A lot of things can happen. But yeah, any thoughts on that? How are tariffs different than dealing with any other expansion or contraction of demand?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not. They're just like dealing with the tax, but it's an imposition on entrepreneurs, and it makes production more costly. Whether you're importing stuff to put in the things that you're producing in the country, like with the automobiles, for instance, or if you're importing the final good and to sell to consumers, of course you have to adapt to those rules. But those are impositions on entrepreneurs, and those are unnecessary and burdens by the state. So the only thing we know of this, we don't know exactly how entrepreneurs will necessarily change their behavior with respect to this one tariff and at what time. What we do know is that, well, this is an extra burden on production, which means it's going to harm consumers. Because entrepreneurs can't produce as much, and they can't produce what they otherwise would have produced, because they would of course pursue the highest value for consumers, because that's where the profit is. I mean, in a sense, that's what I talk about in the book that you showed before, The Seen, the Unseen, and the Unrealized, right? That what is it that entrepreneurs do? Well, they compete by creating as much value as possible for consumers. Okay, so in order to beat the competition in the future, which is what we're talking about, right? You invest now in order to produce something and sell it later on at some point. So you have to try to guess how to best serve consumers. Well, other entrepreneurs are doing that too, so they're competing with them. Now, if there's any one regulation imposed that will change your behavior as an entrepreneur, that means you change to do something that you don't think is the highest value to consumers. It's perhaps a valuable thing to consumers, but you wouldn't have chosen it otherwise because it's of lesser value to consumers. And that means you invest in that type of production instead. So of course the value outcome is going to be lower, but over time, what do next generation entrepreneurs do? Well, they build off of what is. So they look at what have other people produced, how have they produced these things, what technologies have been developed, that sort of thing, right? And if a regulation has shifted what entrepreneurs produce for consumers to some other thing, well, that is what they're going to build off of. So that's going to cement this suboptimal production structure. And then you're going to have a second generation of goods and services produced based off of those investments, whatever they were suboptimal. And that's, of course, going to put us on a lower trajectory overall to create value for consumers. And that's just one.
And that does actually exponentially get worse. Just like it can exponentially get better, it can exponentially crumble too.
Yeah, exactly. And so far, I've been talking about one regulation, right? One regulation that changes entrepreneurs' behavior. Consumers suffer. Okay, imagine a country where there are thousands of regulations. Well,
car industry.
Yeah,
that's a great one. I mean, just car manufacturer, for example, with seatbelts.
Yeah, and every modern country has tens of thousands of regulations, and every entrepreneur is sort of working really hard to avoid breaking too many laws. So satisfying consumers and producing value for consumers is not a primary concern, because they can't focus on it all that much, which means they're producing stuff that is potentially of value, but they're nowhere near the value they otherwise would produce.
Using cars as an example, that's a great one, because a lot of European vehicles are not subject to the crash tests here. So there are some great vehicles that are built around the world that you cannot get here for 20, 25 years until they're, until they, supersede that. But they're like supercars that are like F1 chassis that haven't done crash tests in the US, and they that's unsafe, right? It's like, it's an unbelievable standard that they set. And it's so ridiculously either arbitrary or lobbied, right? Depending on how that is. Either way, it hurts the consumer ultimately. This question really, I like this one, Jason. Do you mind reading that one? Because I'd love to hear your thoughts first, Per, and Jason, I'd love to hear your thoughts because
Yeah.
you are about to be one of these.
I saw this. Yeah, I hope this doesn't derail too much, but just on the topic of regulation and kind of the subjective versus objective value, why do we regulate what kids do? If a value is subjective, shouldn't we let them do what they want? If a baby wants to drink a cup of bleach, value is subjective, and we should just let it, right?
Sure. The valuation is subjective, but subjective means it's personal, right? So it's based off of the knowledge you have. So as a child, you might have very limited knowledge. And you might have very limited understanding. And you probably also have not developed an ability to think in the longer term. I mean, they say the brain is not fully developed until you're like 25 or something like that. I mean, whether that is exactly true or not, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But
the
whole point
subconscious
of-
is somewhere between 2 and 7, 2 and 8. So there's a large gap where 80% of the growth is happening of that. We're talking about the sub routine that runs the processing, the operating system of the child.
Right. And I think it's important to distinguish between whether value is subjective and the choice situation itself too, right? Because that is subjective doesn't mean that it's arbitrary. It doesn't mean that it's irrational or anything like that. It just means that it's personal. So in any situation, you will choose what you think is of highest value. That doesn't mean that someone else doesn't have information that if they shared it with you, you would be better off. You would make a better decision, right? It's very possible. You just can't force that on them, right? Except perhaps if it's a child and you're raising the child and you're teaching them about the world and what have you, right? I mean, subjective value does not imply that everybody is a king or autonomous necessarily.
Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh man. Yeah, I, again, not professional economist here, but I wonder if there's something to be said about I guess how we talk about value. Because yeah, like let's talk about a concert, right? I want to go to this concert. I find that valuable, so I pay the $100 for a ticket, but you would not find that concert valuable at all, and so you choose not to. So that's the easy version of subjective value, right? So I don't really know what else to say about this. Like if you were an adult and you wanted to drink a cup of bleach and you go buy a cup of bleach, I guess that is a value to you, but
Allegedly happened during COVID.
yeah, yeah, inject it. Yeah. I don't know. Interrupt me here because my mind is just spinning.
Okay. I would guess from our, I don't even want to say libertarian because that's not what we are, but whatever this anarchist, anarcho-capitalist, whatever society, Austrian economics, children don't have responsibilities and rights yet that adults do. They just don't. No offense, they just don't. We protect them and we teach them until they are of a certain age. We try to keep them out of doing adult things until they're ready to handle adult things. But there's a nurturing aspect to it. You don't want to coddle them. You don't want to throw them in it too quickly, but that's where I would guess. So without the regulation of the children, it is the parents' rights and responsibility until that child reaches the age that society deems. In America, it's 18. At that point, they are then vaya con Dios, and they're responsible for themselves. Until that point, as a responsible parent, as a person responsible, because they took on the child as their responsibility to to bring up and encourage and nurture, then they have the rights to keep them from doing harm to themselves until they are free to do so.
I think it is important also to emphasize really what Jason said, that I'm not an economist, but well, this is not an economics question, right? It doesn't really have anything to do with economics other than that value is subjective. But value subjective is the assumption in order to then explain the economy. But this, whether children should be allowed to choose whatever, I mean, that's a matter of psychology, law,
Mm.
sociology, what have you, but it's not economics. So it's a different issue, right? So as an economist, I can't really answer that question because
It's good philosophical just to
Yeah.
to bounce around, right? But
Mhm.
but from our general 50,000 foot, that's kind of how we are as parents. I would guess as parents in that way.
Yeah.
Per,
Then you could get
this
into a
has
whole
been
philosophical thing to what you were saying, Mark, is like when does an adult or a child become an adult, and when do they get that freedom of choice? And why not just have these super beings in charge of everyone that can make decisions and keep us from harming ourselves, right? So then you get into a government, and that's not my thing. And I'm sorry for my ramble earlier. I promise I had a coherent thought at one point, and it just escaped me. So if it comes back, I'll tell you guys.
you're full of coherent thoughts. Trust me, I know from example. So
It was
Per,
there for a minute, but yeah, it's gone.
you've been with us. We've got about another 15 minutes. We are so grateful for your time. Thank you so much. Over 170 people on X. I completely screwed up. Rumble should have about 300 people on it right now, but I didn't connect the two because I made the link late last night and didn't. I blame StreamYard, but it's my fault. So I take personal accountability, but we will upload it later. I am
I
just so
blame
grateful. We have
Obama.
probably a couple more questions before Jason, but thank you again for joining us on a Monday, especially Labor Day. Day everybody's pretty much off.
Well, you
Yes,
bet. My
yes.
pleasure.
Well, hey, we've got a few minutes left here. One thing that I did want to hit, we've been talking about for the last couple of shows, actually, artificial intelligence, something that could potentially change the economy that we live in a major way. So it could make all of these conversations obsolete if we can have hyperabundance. The AI creates so much stuff so fast that we don't know what to do with it, and then cost gets super low. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think that's a real possibility? First of all, for the AI to become advanced so quickly that we do have this hyperabundance?
That's a very good question. So I mean, I think what we call AI now, and I mean, I think there's a reason why we changed what we mean by AI and why there's now an AGI. That is what we used to call AI before.
Hmm.
we, and that's simply because the AIs of today, they can spit back what has already been done. So it's inductive and it's historical. So it can't really do anything new. What it can do is combine things that existed before, and I mean, these chatbots, basically the AIs, they they are really good at figuring out what a human being would say, not content wise necessarily, but in terms of the words, right? So it can mimic how a human sounds very easily because it
And
has
mimic is the operative word because we'll get to that for sure.
right. And I think it can, since it is taking history and sort of extrapolating. Yeah, it can create images, but it's based off of what type of images have been done before and that it has sort of learned from. And the same thing with when it's creating poems and stuff like that. It's just taking what was before and combining them in sort of a novel way, I suppose, but not a creative way, right? Because it can continue, but it can't figure out. First of all, it can't figure out what is true, which is a huge problem, right? It's hallucinating a lot. And I've tried to use it in research where it just makes up these references and these quotes all the time, and it's just impossible because I have to double check everything it says. So it takes more time using the damn thing than to not use it. But I mean, of course, it can produce texts and it can produce videos and things like that very easily and very quickly, which of course will undermine also what we can trust. So there's a huge problem in terms of uh, information and what is just AI generated. Um, I think it can definitely take over and do repetitive tasks and tasks that are sort of within specific boundaries very easily. So it can say programming is a great example where programming language, it works in one certain way. You can't have a command that works a little different ways depending on right what it feels like. No, I mean, I was a programmer before, and no, a command does one thing and it does it that one way, right? There might be a
I
bug in
remember creating I remember creating a word, was it Word Perfect or something, or a macro? And I used like where you had to enter things, enter, space, space, space. I would put all those things in as a macro, and I could do data entry a lot quicker for like orders back in the day, because we would create those manual type things where that's where the AI would go good, is like click here, check this box, do this, do that, fill that out, right? Kind of thing.
Right. And it can also produce a new app, for instance. You can tell it that, well, in this programming language, produce the code for an app that does this and that. And then you can tell, no, change it, change this so that when I hit the button there, it does this and whatever else, right? Because in the programming language, all the information is there. It just needs to figure out how to do it, right? And it knows everything about the programming language. So programmers are sort of, they're in trouble. Same thing with anyone copy editing and checking grammar and writing news articles and reports and textbooks and what have you. All those things AI can produce very easily and very quickly. What it can't do is creative stuff. And I know that people refer to what AI is doing as creative because, oh, it's creating all these movies and it's creating all these songs and creating new text and things like that. But the issue is that it's extrapolating from the past. What is truly creative is not doing what was done in the past, right? So it's like a new scientific discovery. It's not an extrapolation from previous scientific discoveries. It is taking everything that everybody believes and literature that is out there and saying, wait a minute, I think something is wrong here. I think this is a better solution, but it's not something that you can find statistically in what already exists. You add something to it, probably because you say that, well, I don't think that data point matters, and I think that one is more important, and I think that one data point there is much less significant than we believe, right? Those sort of judgments AI can't do, or if we instruct it to, it can only do it randomly. But that's not the point, because random, it can give you any kind of shit basically, right? But creativity is about making those judgment calls and saying, wait a minute, I'm going to say no to these things that everybody's saying yes to and that we've found evidence for, because I don't think those are as important as we believe. And then I'm going to say yes to this other thing that people have already discarded, because I think there is something there that is actually valuable. And then you create something new because you're breaking with the mainstream and you're breaking with what we know. Right? And AI can only do that in a sort of semi-random manner, whereas what we do is we try to assess the potential outcome of it, much like what entrepreneurs are doing, right? They're saying, well, I don't think this is the right way to do things. We should do it in a very different way, or in a slightly different way, and use technology in a different manner, right? So I'm going to produce this because I think consumers will like it a lot and they will get a lot of value out of it. So, I mean, the iPhone is a good example there, I think, because everybody was producing flip phones back in the day. And they were all trying to produce as small flip phones as possible. Smaller.
Motorola Razr. That's the best one. It was right. The thinnest guy.
Right. And I had one that was so damn small that, I mean, it was bouncing around in my pocket, right? And every year there was a smaller one and a smaller one and a smaller one. What would an AI do with that information? Well, we could probably find gaps there was some materials that hadn't been considered yet, and maybe they could combine things in a different way that sort of is obvious if you look at all the data, but it's not simply not possible for a human to do, or we just haven't looked at it or whatever, right? But it would continue.
Well, the iPhone screen has the golden ratio, for example, and AI would have probably said, golden ratio is pleasing to the eye. You might want to incorporate that in your design or something, in some kind of, recommending.
Right.
But it probably would have gone smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right. There's exactly
with that trajectory.
Right? Yeah. There's exactly that with the smallness, that what Steve Jobs said was like, nah, let's make a big ass phone instead. Because I don't think the small matters. And I think a big one, and I mean, the iPhone was damn big and thick and slow and everything with the first one, right? So he said, well, let's make one that doesn't perform as well. It's hard to place a phone call on, but combines other things, but you can have it in your pocket and whatever else, right? But it's bigger. So it broke with what everybody else thought and what everybody else knew, Well, that's the creative part of it, and AI can't do that. So I think what it's going to do is going to replace, just like what has happened for manual labor, a lot of it has been replaced by machines. And what AI is doing now is replacing a lot of white collar workers, and the bureaucracy that they're doing, the procedures, the forms, all this other stuff, programming, text editing, text generation, video editing, all of these stuff. It's going to be able to take over a lot of these things, but what it can't do is take over the entrepreneurial aspect of it. So the creation, the creativity is something that we should focus on. I mean, how to please consumers the best way we can.
On that front, this is where I asked this question, because I think you're correct. LLMs, I separate from like an AGI thing. So I use AlphaGo, AlphaZero as this example. AlphaGo did this thing called Move 37. It was a 1 in 10,000 chance that a human would have put that chip in that position. The guy was on a smoke break. He comes back and sees where this chip is, and he literally like loses his mind. Like, never saw this move. It's just some completely non-human thing that they would have done. Now, what's crazy, that seemed already interesting on its own. Well, then there was this AlphaZero. So AlphaGo was given all the games of Go ever played and fed it, and then it played against a human, and then it beat the human. This AlphaZero was only told the rules of the game, never fed a game, and just played against itself. And that beat the one that had the human feeding even in it. You know what I mean? So even with all of the humanity. Now, that's an interesting one, is the Move 37. The second one is the ones where the two AIs glitch and they start conversing in foreign languages or changing into complete creations. How do you equate for the skip of that like hiccup in the quantum versus, like, to your point, it doesn't seem structural at that point when it hiccups like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, true. But I think the issue is that creativity is not just a hiccup, and it's not just an arbitrary event, but it's something that is guided by a sound assessment of value, right? Because you say that, well, can AI be entrepreneurs? Well, no, but we can instruct AI to produce random things. But random things is a very costly way of creating new value, right? An entrepreneur will, yes, he or she will pivot a number of times when they learn more about how people use the thing and whatever else. But they have an idea from the beginning of a problem they want to solve because they think that people will value having that solved. But that's because they are humans too. But an AI is not a human. And you can say, well, people like this sort of thing. Well, that's not specific enough. You have to be able to imagine what it is like in that situation for you as a human and probably as other humans. And is there
and
a
where it
market
excels
for
is
that?
patterns. It's where humans are pattern driven, music and things like that. That's where it excels, because it's pattern recognition. It's one of the best things that it can do. So we've had you for an hour and a half. We are so grateful. Zach jumped on. Zach, now, Per, thank you again for joining us. You're going to be with us on the 17th with Zach and another gentleman. So we'll have you. We're so grateful to have you. But I don't want to take any more this time, because Jason, please feel free to share the rest of the time that you have to ask any other questions or anything you have for Per before we go.
Yeah, if we could just finish off the AI stuff with one more question. The fear obviously is that it's going to advance so fast, and like you said, it's getting rid of these white collar jobs. The fear is that it's going to take so many jobs at once and create this big pain point where no one has an income. So at that point, what do we do? Are we stuck? Is that the end of the economy? Are people going to just die off at that point? What could happen here?
Well, I mean, it's the lesser people who are going to die off, so it doesn't really bother me. But
Or do we need UBI? That's my other part of the question.
No, I think that, I mean, I understand the fear, but I think it is misplaced, because we have been through a number of revolutions in terms of technology and what have you. And each time it's been, oh my God, this is going to kill us. This is going to take all the jobs away and everything like that. I mean, a job, yes, it is how we make money, but a job is really a means of production. So if we can automate jobs, that means that we're going to get just more goods and services much, much cheaper, and no one will have to do the damn work. And I mean, today is Monday. Yes, it's a holiday, but people are going to work tomorrow, and most people will not say, "Yes, finally a new week, and I will go to work." No, they'll say, "God damn it, I don't want to get up out of bed and go to meet my damn boss and the customers and the clients." And people don't want to go to work, right? It's not. We would rather be at home and entertain ourselves. For most people who work, right? Uh, so getting rid of jobs, it doesn't really seem like much of a problem if you think of it what it is economically speaking, right? But even so, it's certain types of jobs that will be automated. But every time we've been through this type of revolution, we have had even more jobs created elsewhere. And it's not completely different work, right? So yes, with say touch screens, you won't need as many people taking your orders in McDonald's anymore. But you will need a whole lot of more people developing the touch screens and the software. And then you release a lot of people who can improve the burgers, which should be easy, I suppose, and who can
More crickets.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
sorry.
And create more McDonald's restaurants in different places and what have you, because you have a lot of more people available for all these things, right? So it's not the case that 150 years ago, when 95% of everybody was working as farmers, it's not the case that we today only have 5% employment and we have 95% of people saying that, damn, I wish there was a farm where I could toil. No, they have other jobs. We have plenty of other jobs, and it's been the case every time. And every time people say that, well, this time is different. No, it's not different. Economically speaking, it's not different. But what might be a difference, but not not a lot different. But it is that the market is so much more regulated now. So there's less space for people to create new business and try out new things as entrepreneurs. So that just means that the transition is going to be more burdensome because we can't respond as quickly because we're not allowed to create value where we want to create value, which means we're going to be just waiting for opportunities to happen and waiting to find those sort of narrow opportunities that are still allowed. So, I mean, the best thing we can do to survive the AI generation revolution and become prosperous out of this is to deregulate the heck out of the market and let people start businesses and serve each other for profit. Then
Open
let
source
AI,
it and go.
yeah,
forward.
and let the AI
I-
do the work.
Then I guess the argument would be, but those greedy capitalist CEOs are going to take all the profits for themselves, and the rest of us will be left with nothing, right?
I'm sure a lot of people would use that argument, yeah. But I mean, that's the problem there is that what profits are we talking about? We're not talking about just replacing people with AI and then having the same products at the same prices. No, we're talking about if AI can automate things, then the cost per unit is going to fall dramatically. A lot more competitors can use these types of tools and create other things. So the cost to consumers is going to fall. It's going to plummet. And that's not really a problem that goods and services become much, much cheaper.
Yes. And the capital you need to produce things and everything else coming together, you'll need a lot less of, less barriers to entry. Per,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody go check out this book. It's great. The Seen, the Unseen, and the Unrealized. It explains all about why modern monetary theory is good and true. No, it's a
Follow
real
Per.
it's a real step-by-step of nothing missed of how regulations affect the economy, starting from the foundations of production. So it's very, very good. Thanks for joining us today. Mark, any final thoughts?
Yeah, did the thunder go through through the microphone at all? Can you guys hear the thunder? It is
No.
right here. So anyway, no, it's been great. Per, thank you so much. Once again, everyone, join us on the 17th with Per. I like to put a pin in this one because there is something about work and the limited human people work and purpose and meaning, and how that's where I feel like a lot of it gets lost, because like they conflate their work with their meaning, and yeah, they could do something else, but sometimes it's like only what they can do, kind of thing. So a lot of things about that, but thank you so much. It's been awesome.
Anything else you'd like to plug or put out there? Where do you want people to go?
No, I will just repeat what Mark said, that follow me on X. And I mean, it's at Per Bylund, so it's easy to find. And I tweet practically every day, a little too much, but
We follow you, sir.
It's great stuff. It's great stuff. Everybody go check it out now.
It's been too long since I've cared. I keep the pain inside my head. But this reckless life of a bandit will surely take me to my grave. I've got my iron and my six string. We're gonna ride into the night.